Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's episode is a live stream, so I will request for you to excuse the additional noises. The purpose of these live streams is in some sense a way for me to see how the eyes of other beings on the planet also engage similar concepts or whatnot. So feel free to share. And now to get to one of the most important talks that I feel it's a discussion that needs to be had by our species. Initially, I had the title "A Mind That Animates Itself," and then I crystallized that notion more into a more general topic called the simulations of nature. This is a very chaotic idea, believe it or not, to engage with, but its chaos is not as important as what it may reveal, the order it may reveal. Anything new you do will have an influence. They say if you want to control the future, you control the past. If you want to control the past, you control the present. This has been in regards to certain nations declaring their own history, pretty much. So, pretty much, when you change the history of a civilization, you're changing the story of that civilization. And guess what? History is his story. It's some person's documented kind of findings. But the notion of the simulations of nature, let's begin with this. We find ourselves in 2019 to be creatures that have been going through an evolutionary process of what we consider scientifically to be 4 billion years. Okay, so after 4 billion years, bacteria grew legs and updated its Facebook status. So, in some sense, we find ourselves in the presence of the current intelligence of life. Now, we have to ask certain questions. Asking questions is kind of like putting the mind in front of a mirror. A question opens up the realm of the inquiry. Pretty much, questions stretch your attention to new possibilities. I personally consider it like this. Let's first begin with this viewpoint. In ancient traditions, they had it the opposite. They had it the other way around. In 2019, based on how the majority of human beings are behaving, I think it's fair to say that most people consider matter was here first and then consciousness. When matter was here first, then consciousness, that means physical reality has a value for you more than your subjective reality. When matter becomes the gravity of the situation, when in some sense the materialistic reference is kept first, you're going to see the consciousness is the mystery of your matter. If you were a neurologist, you wanted to acknowledge the situation, it would be like that. You like so many people have gone searching for consciousness in the brain, only to realize that they have found a meaninglessness, and that meaninglessness, which is translated into the hard problem of consciousness, the hard and easy problems of consciousness, pretty much the mystery of it. Um, how can I tell you? I personally consider that it not ignite in the brain. Okay, our consciousness is not just in our brain, because the world is too designed. The designs are too many. That's why. So, anyways, the notion is nature was moving unconsciously. Imagine just a pool of energy, as the Big Bang says, and this pool of energy that was there somehow before things started, before the bang, there was a pool of energy. I mean, like, that's pretty much the origin story. Pretty much nature and phenomena. Excuse me. Phenomena is occurring unconsciously. Pretty much there were nobody who cared about existence for so many years, we consider. Then suddenly human beings sprouted. Oh my god, this was unique because for the first time a part of the world could see itself separate from the world. We suddenly were not no longer an extension of the planet, we were in a planet, we were on a planet. Do you see, the mind crafted itself separate than the world it was made of? So your mind is your soul. Did you know that? And what I mean by that is that the person who entertains the notion that matter came first and then consciousness will eventually, their excitement will lead them to the opposite. They're going to come into a certain state, their mind's going to entertain a notion that consciousness was here first and then matter, and then something unique happens. It's as if at first you're identifying with the objects of observance, now you're identifying with the observer. The observer is not a static phenomena, it's this continuous process where existence is happening and we are watching it as ourselves. But the way this self is constructed, it is our hands that sculpt the masks we put on. What I'm trying to get to is that the free will's emergence in the world, if we acknowledge there was no conscious activity prior, was a simulation. That means I am kind of very shocked. I feel it's a level of savageness to purely see the world as materialistic. The reason it's savage, the reason it is chaotic to just see the world as matter, is because it's a indirect method of eliminating the unknown. When you restrict the evidence to a certain range of acceptance, it's done. The world is done. It's pretty much like somebody who doesn't want to see new things, trying to contemplate things only through what they have seen. Like, how would I say it? It's like if you see it objective, if you feel it is more a materialistic phenomena than any other sort, pretty much we're a simulation of atoms, no? Our mind will then come to us as electrons somehow being this mind. Do you see, somehow nature had enough intelligence in it to be a person? So there is a uniqueness here. It's like the more the person looks within, the more they are looking at the condition of their universal sector. It's very fascinating. Once you study the macrocosm, many secrets of the microcosm are revealed. I find that they say history repeats itself, and I feel this constant rise and fall of civilizations throughout our history on this planet. That, like, when we look at the history of this planet, the constant rise and fall of civilizations. You know what we notice? If we think we can know truth, God is in some sense dead, as Friedrich Nietzsche says, because you don't need God. Okay, you don't need the unknown. If you think your knowledge is only it, then you don't. It's as if some person who's put a blindfold on their face, who has blinded their vision with an idea, with a belief, and this belief is not allowing their mind to entertain novelty. So objectively, our thoughts, our identity is a simulation of a waking state of a conscious, biomechanism or something. We are like this kind of programs of nature. When you go listen to debates, for example, I was this is not very recent actually. I mean, like a couple weeks ago, I think a couple months ago. Okay, let's say a couple weeks. A couple weeks ago, guys. I mean, I can't lie, it was more than a couple weeks. But I saw this video of Noam Chomsky, this professor from MIT who has a PhD in linguistics. He's a professor of language and economy and politics, you could say. And he was having a debate with Michel Foucault. I'm trying to say it like as the French would say. And he was with this French philosopher. So you're seeing a younger Noam Chomsky debating an older Michel Foucault about the nature of reality and truth. And it's very fascinating because Noam Chomsky associated this kind of phenomena of our intelligence to creativity and eventually came to the depths of not being sure whether the creativity emerged out of a sort of DNA, like it's like your creativity's in your DNA, or not. So pretty much it's like the Carl Jung spoke about the subconscious mind. This subconscious mind, how can I tell you? It's either being directed by a pre-program or the free will's mystery. So pretty much Noam Chomsky was saying we are this kind of creative program of nature. I feel like that's where his attention was. And Michel Foucault was saying that there's so many illusions to what we are seeing that how can we be certain? And that's where it's very incredible because I feel Noam Chomsky was a philosopher of language, an incredible professor of language. Let me say it like this: Noam Chomsky was a professor of language, but Michel Foucault was a philosopher of language. The philosopher has certain freedoms that the official mind cannot give itself. You see, it's like you gotta kind of see where the world is before you talk about it, right? Pretty much what I feel is going on is that either we can interpret the current intelligence of the human being as this kind of slow development of a simulation of a self in an empty world. So it's either we're going to see the meaning of life start from emptiness, go to emptiness, or we see it start from fullness, temporarily be in emptiness, and then go to fullness. So pretty much I feel intelligence has two ways it can move existentially. I'm making a statement where some philosophers would be like, no, he didn't just say existential. That means inclusive of all existential conditions. So now this is the unique thing, okay? Think of it this way. We are a part of this world. We extended out of it. We had a sort of animalistic design. It's as if it was already programmed into the planet. Okay, and so this creature, as it's recognized it is separate from the earth, I am saying something they don't teach, and I think nobody has can teach because nobody has considered it yet, or maybe they don't care to consider it, or maybe in some sense the idea is much deeper than the surface norm the mainstream can acknowledge, because that's always a possibility. In today's era of Western political correctness, I find what truth is dead. First, God died. Friedrich Nietzsche said, God died, we killed it. Now, truth is dead. That means people are no longer caring for true values. It's as if their desires have won the war, even though their uh, discipline has won the battle. So that's the issue. We have to see what we are being driven by. And this is the thing. I feel that when technology gets super advanced, there's going to come a philosophical inquiry of whether it makes sense to transfer consciousness into a mechanical phenomenon. Pretty much man being able to create a technology that can make him experience what it would be like to create a world. That is pretty much a full circle. That means God's creation became God. Okay? That's the death of the egoic constructs realm. So, anyways, that's I'm getting too ahead of myself here. So here's the notion: unconscious movement of nature, eyes open. These eyes immediately recognize of the individual body. Once they recognize the limits of the movement, the sight, how it moves itself in a body, eventually it began to, how can I tell you, the moment it saw itself as a body, it also saw itself as an individual thought. And that was the spark of the subjective evolution. It wasn't some supernatural thing, it was a consideration. Now, what that meant is that for the first time, the dualism of the mind and body began. That means the intelligence, we are just like you plant a lemon tree and it gives like fruit lemons, you know? Similarly, the human being's intelligence that was planted in some sense in this universal sector by the unknown, in some sense sprouted into knowledge through a sort of dualism of intelligence. We are literally like a moment that is dividing itself. And this moment divides itself objectively as matter, and it divides itself as the watcher of the intelligence. You know, you are watching your life right now by existing, but you're also performing. So we find life to be a kind of strange place where where the audience sit is on the stage where everyone performs. Like it's one of those strange things where the audience and performer are in the same moment. So the subjective evolution, the subjective evolution as man's moment divided into a static intelligence and a dynamic intelligence, suddenly this emergence of a mind and body occurred. So what I'm saying is, like, right now, if I asked you who you are and if you were to tell me about your backstory, I would tell you that story is not physically here. So where is it? And you will see we are all carrying memories as masks to put on when we look in the mirror. It is very supreme, the intelligence of our that we find the human species to be. Okay, we have not discovered our intelligence fully. We have not even created an educational system that values it. You see, we don't care for knowledge only if it can, make our wallets a bit thicker. So pretty much we can say we don't know how the unknown was simulated, but we know that the unknown simulated the known. Now the known has simulated like the objective existence. We conclude, at least, and scientifically, because I want to honor the achievements of science, I must in some sense um, start from the most important chair. So I'll tell you, this. Um, just like how you look at your human body, if you were to legit right now put your both of your hands on the ground, you'd kind of see why your wrist moves certain angles and it doesn't. So it's very easy to see we were a four-limbed body, okay? Like we were using four limbs, you know? And then we suddenly totally let go of that manner after a long process, gradual, slow process. And it's kind of like what we see about history is just a fast forwarded kind of projection of, like, what I'm trying to tell you is the world opened our eyes, and then our eyes opened the world in the world. That world in the world is the linguistic simulation, and it's how subjectively we exist. Okay, this subjective existence is maintained by the atmosphere of language. So think of it this way: if you start writing right now who you are on a piece of paper, literally you write the question, "Who am I?" and you begin answering it. This would, in some sense, be one of Mr. Within's recommendations of stuff to do. But you got to begin building. It's as if somebody said it like this: the true warrior is never intimidated by the battle. You know why? Because his eyes are set on the war. What that means is the person never fails because it's not decided till the last moment. Communication established the second world. The second world is, in some sense, I say, where thoughts live. And so this is, if I tell you right now, like, imagine like a golden glowing apple just hovering in front of you, for example. Okay, just imagine that, right? You might be a person who has that. So I'm saying if you do, but still imagine another one beside it. Okay, so I want you to just imagine something and recognize that you have access to the design that you imagined. Like you can imagine something in front of your eyes, even, but it's not physically there. So our thoughts seem to be in an invisible room that is accessible in our waking state of consciousness. In ancient Vedic terms, I could say, from the elegance of the writings in the Ribu Gita comes this. From the elegance of the Ribu Gita comes this wisdom to us that there are four states of existence that one must acknowledge. That means there's these four modes of life for a human being you need to acknowledge. One is your waking state. So right now, me and you, like, I am currently, because this is a live stream, that means this is my waking state. This is also your waking state if you're tuning into the live stream. Now, there is the, in some sense, sleep and deep sleep state. That means this is the part of the day that is blank because your eyes closed. And this is so in some sense these are the states: the waking state, the dream state, the deep sleep state, and I'll tell you the fourth one, but I want to say a bit more. In deep sleep, you're not an idea. Your body exists, but your mind is in some sense elsewhere. Okay? Or invisible, I could say. When we are in our sleep, like we're like when a person is asleep, that means they're alive, yet they are at the same time inactive. Okay. So, anyways, there's the dream state is very unique too because the dream state suggests that the mind can simulate reality without even being awake. Do you know what I mean? That means when you sleep, your imagination continues, but we can't say what happens in your sleep is reality, right? The fourth state was the state that the yogic mind acknowledged was the state of awareness of all of these. The fourth state was within all these, and it was a state where even in deep sleep and even in like your dream state, you're awake. It's as if the person after that point, the conceptually would not exist with the idea of sleep. It wouldn't matter for them. It's as if all states have recognized the primary kind of background awareness, that you have found contentment of the watcher, of the unknown aspect of the watcher within. So pretty much what I'm telling you is many children and many of the human beings alive right now, the way I feel they're approaching it, approaching life, is that they want something out of it. But the issue with wanting something out of it means that we might not explore before we decide. So to value exploration, we have to get rid of inefficiency. Getting rid of inefficiency doesn't mean we judge what is inefficient. We build what is efficient. So in some sense, we have to have an ability as a civilization to accept the world as it is now, but to also wonder if we could evolve every aspect of living, and we're 8 billion minds on this planet, not just bodies, so the world is overpopulated with idea generating kind of instruments. I find that the problems of mankind, they exist in mankind's eyes. And if the problem exists in our eyes, also the answers exist in our eyes. So mysticism will eventually take you, or not just mysticism, anytime you wonder about how a self and a world is here, your mind will play around. Eventually it will come to know the moment. When it comes to know the moment, that's when a sort of bliss arises. This bliss is a suggestion that conscious existence is all of this. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. Our eyes are open in a world. We know we are mortal. We look at it, I see a squirrel out there, like on the tree. So this squirrel on the tree, I don't know if it like, it doesn't, I don't think it contemplates in such a way. So I recognize the uniqueness of the design of the evolutionary journey so far. So for me, it's not that I play instruments. My whole existence is an instrumentation of the intelligence of my moment. You see, I recognize that you got to become responsible, and you only become responsible when something is real for you or important for you. You see, somebody who's important for you is because you have, in some sense, truly seen them. It's like the moment where evil sacrifices itself for the good, and then the good reminds the evil it never was evil. How far will words go in a changing world? So I'm speaking of a sort of the objective visible reality being a sort of known simulation of unknown, a simulation of objective knowing that is kept in the unknown. And in some sense, I'm saying that our subjective reality, what is unknown to it, is the objective. So what that means is like something that we can't comprehend is simulating matter, and something that matter is simulating is the subjective existence's value. Your thoughts exist because there's something to exist as it. Do you recognize this? Do you see how fascinating this world is because it transcends the language that we have, in some sense, developed? The moment life goes beyond the language threshold, that's when I say a poet is born. It's very interesting. In front of our eyes, the world turns only in one way. Therefore, we conclude it in a singular dimension. Behind our eyes, the world moves in many ways. And that is why a person can have ambitions, dreams, visions. These visions are a kind of processed response to the data of the present moment, as if the human being has seen from, from the surface of the earth, the shattering of the moon. And so comes the great conclusion that our eyes are in some sense keeping the projection of the world as much as the world is keeping the projector of our eyes. We are the attempt, our free will is very unique. Do you know our free will is like in a bubble? It's like the reason we have free will, the reason you can just evoke any thought, you can think anything right now. Pretty much I'm saying words and your own thinking ability is filling it, is putting the color of your experiences into it. I'm trying to say that our free will exists to itself as its own creator. You see, it's as if like I could totally see how creativity or anything set from normal back in the day by the Inquisition, by the religious Inquisition, could be seen as blasphemy. The problem with beliefs is that they set the speed of change of a certain environment at like they limit the speed, they limit the acceleration of the civilization. Imagine right now all these separate nations in the UN, all the countries that we consider, they all found a way where their economies were thriving, their people were succeeding, they maxed out their success. So imagine right now we have poor countries and we have rich countries. Okay, we don't have a sort of global organizational system so able to, in some sense, kind of command all separate nations to find, to, in some sense, branch out into a global community. Let me tell you, our species is blinded by stories from the past when it can, in some sense, create a new story in the future. It's kind of like you're free to move your body, but you're not free to choose how your body looks like because you're born into it. Okay? Or we use that sort of terminology. I find that the body is a beautiful aspect of my moment, but there's somewhere something that the body has value for that is not per se can be given attributes of this sort of world. Okay, kind of like the world is inside yourself is inside the world. It's as if you know what it is I'm trying to communicate, guys. I'm trying to communicate that we have sold to the world, like pretty much how the world has played out so far, is that people are entertaining a story that they're just objective creatures. And so, what is the greatest thing an objective creature can do? It can just objectively be very active, or we see it has led to the mind, which means subjectively be very active. So, you can say it's like these are two dimensions of existence that can be contributed to by a living being. Um, Um, in order to conquer the unknown, the mind divided itself. The subjective self has to do with the context of the world, the objective self has to do with the concepts of the world. What that means is the spirit is the concept, but the context of the existence of that term, even in the dictionary, is edgeless. It cannot be contained. Not all ideas can be measured. They're just pointers, you know. What I'm trying to say is that I feel we have been conditioned into an individual conscious personality that only values knowledge because it has this spoiled attitude of evidence first or I'm not going to try, you know. And so this sort of evidence first, I'm not going to try, creates this sort of mindset in the species where people are waiting for good things to happen, but they're not actually doing good things. I feel the intelligence had to separate itself to kind of realize itself. And that was the 4 billion years of evolution. And now I'm saying we have this sophistication of a multidimensional approach. That means any person on this planet who has ever said, I have thoughts, I had a thought, or even has spoken that way, you're entertaining a multidimensional context. As if there is something here, but there is something also other. So you can say thought is the invisible other. Okay, so all those people on this planet who have thought they have seen something else across this veil of the unknown, I am not denying you what you have seen, but I am saying a thought is there. And so what that means is it's fascinating because if you want to study the world, it's easy. Just get a microscope and just examine the cells of existence, how the building blocks were made. you know, Kind of studying the world for science is like taking this Lego pieces out and studying the Lego pieces, and noticing the designs of nature. What I'm kind of telling you, that's not the point. I feel the point is uh, intelligence was divided, now it unites, and it goes like this kind of endless wave of different rhythms in civilization. That means there's the season of enlightenment. This is a concept where, in some sense, I don't know if it's written anywhere in the history of mankind, but I'm telling you, the notion is that the civilization is experiencing seasons. So what that means is that there are these greater cycles that are influencing us. There are these forces of nature that are occurring that we have not yet interpreted. These forces of nature, it's as if we are finding ourselves as a multidimensional seeker at an intersection of some sort of objective phenomena and subjective phenomena. When we study their relationship, we wonder about how we can accept the conclusion. So we see if we accept life as a changing dynamic phenomenon, we can never ascribe it a thought. But if we consider life to be something we can take a snapshot belief out of it, I find that we don't need that sort of approach. Civilization has to give itself space. No artist can create something if they're uncomfortable. And if they create something into a state of discomfort, they have done a disservice to themselves because they have not allowed the efficiency of their most comfortable space. Like, you don't understand. It's like genius requires a proper audience or it will be shy forever. So many people devalue themselves because their mind wants to be great. That's just in every child. It's like the moment they ask the child, what do you want to be when you grow up? The kid is thinking like a businessman already. I'm telling you, life has a value where you're here to experience what you are, so you don't have to really be defined by too much data, that is, waves of data that hit you. You can experience just your state of being. But there's also ways where you can consciously align. That's the ability of the free will. That means you can say nature was making the decisions of this animal for it until it became conscious, and through the subjective evolution, a subjective self could administer free will as a conceptual kind of data processor. So what I'm telling you is that your awareness, consciousness, a matter tapped into consciousness again. When it tapped into consciousness, it was like a chemical reaction of the production of a one moment. So you can say it was like another sort of enlightenment when we recognize that there are such phenomena as thought. And you realize thoughts individualize, they solidify the more when you speak. So whatever you speak about, you're giving it more structure, more detail, more layers of phenomena. Like sometimes when I'm speaking here, I am kind of drawing a canvas of various ways that I am kind of navigating the attention of the listener. So I'm telling you that if reality is a simulation of nature, to ascribe it any sort of linear meaning is just the artwork of the human mind. It is your world, and so forth. This is why the personal world is elusive, when the person, its greatest value is found when it lives for the world. Do you see? Like, I feel like you got to think about it this way. Even the worst person on this planet needs a reference of to know what is good and bad. You know? When we acknowledge that people have a subjective self and an objective self, we will suddenly acknowledge people's minds. And we will recognize that the mind is being influenced by so many factors that it is in some sense impossible to pinpoint it. I don't know how, in some sense, psychologists can analyze a human mind. That is like, man, these guys have dared, try to measure the sky. It's like somebody who's measuring the sky, you'll be like, all right, buddy, it's going to take you more than your lifetime to build the ruler to measure it. So, in some sense, some endeavors are just not meant for mortal beings. So, you got to measure your activity with mortality, because the ability of your imagination can make you want to be something that nature doesn't move that way. So you got to find how nature moves. That's just the tapping into your intuition. You know what's funny? What if the whole purpose of synchronicities was, in some sense, all this whole new age kind of glowy find of, like, people thinking how can I say it, like a sort of, they feel synchronicity is like an externalization of their intuition. For me, it's as if a person cannot even, I recommend this, don't study spirituality unless you have studied language first. You got to see how language is being kept in your experience and find a contentment. There's many things in this world that will bring tears in your eyes. These tears, whether they're joyous or whether they're sad, it is just how the world moves. Mr. Within is just saying our ancestors, the reason they did not want to change is because they were afraid of the unknown. And I'm telling you, our species in 2019 should not be afraid of the unknown, because whatever do, we will be fools. It's like, trust me, just like when I looked like 1,000 years ago and I saw what people did, and I was like, what a foolish species we were. Similarly, I know that 1,000 years from now, they're going to look at how we're living and they're going to be like, what foolish people, or what foolish ancestors did we have. So this is why honor was a challenge for the modernity that could not accept antiquity. I remember when I was like 11, my cousin was 5 years younger, and me and my brother, like, my cousin had come to my house in Iran, and and for some reason there was a cup of milk that the milk had been just out for more than a few hours or something. And so my younger cousin just comes and sees a glass of full milk, and he's trying to listen to his mother, so he drinks that milk. And so What happens is that suddenly his mother comes and scolds him. And I recognize it's as if nobody can, there's no need for advice in this world because the result has to come from your decisions. The mind that just accepts does not understand the greater dimensions of intelligence. This world is neither hell and it is not heaven. There is confusion though. It's like it's not just enough to see how the physical world turns. The individual must also study how the world turns in their value system, in their own unique experience. You will eventually recognize you're a master of yourself. You know how the ancient saying said, how the ancient saying said 10,000, do 10,000 hours of an activity. And by doing this 10,000 hours of an activity, you would have done it so many times that you would have seen the true nature of the art form, and then your own style would emerge. Kind of like, imagine you're the first person ever on top of Mount Everest, and when you put that kind of like flag there, when you do it, it's as if like your own style has been created, as if a past personality has transcended through the evolution of the world. Either the world changes quicker than yourself, or yourself changes quicker than the world. Eventually, this game will go on for a while until the person realizes the ability of their true nature, until the person realizes the freedom of the ever-present intelligence. There's many ways we're constantly sculpting the world into a story, and sometimes we can't just, you need challenges in life or there would not be any advancement. So you see, it's kind of like a very strange situation because we can't tell the species they're just atoms or there would be anarchy. So if there's some sort of order, that means there's some sort of notion of the intelligence of the moment that it is more than what it is now. So it is the value of the future that is inspiring the creativity of the present moment. The value of the future has to find some sort of efficiency. This efficiency will suddenly be that moment where the artist who's been living with a sort of entertainment of irrationality and whatnot suddenly calls forth for the spirit of rationality to guide it. This means suddenly we begin to see that just like how your brain has a creative side and an analytical side, you know, similarly we see the world's philosophies have two hemispheres. It's as if there's one part of civilization meant to just allow the world to advance, and there's one part of civilization that has to acknowledge the emptiness all of this is hovering in. We have to be real beings, or we have denied ourselves our nature. So I'm saying that you free your mind by understanding how you're considering it's not free, and could that be as temporary as everything else? So think of it this way, you're like a battery, you're like a packet of energy, a box of, not a box, but like an atomic container of energy, and this energy can be directed. And so many animals on this planet, so many species don't have the same ability that the human being does. That means this, the excuse my language, but the most foolish human being on this planet is still superior to any other species of an animal based on what it has been introduced to. It is what the eyes of the animal were open to. Do you understand what I'm saying? That means it's not survival of the fittest. It is survival of those who are seeing more out of the picture. And that's what continuity was. That's what suddenly the people recognize. We don't have to live in a place where there's danger. We can go somewhere else. And trust me, those people who are fighters in this world, they can get lost in that mode too. There's many moments of the world where something chaotic happened and I responded to it. I reacted mainly. What that means is like I was blinded by my ego to forget. It's like some people feel the world doesn't see their real, like everybody sees everybody's true nature. It's just that our minds are not silent enough to recognize it. The more your intelligence moves towards silence and stillness, the more your observance of thought and its presence shifts. You don't understand your definition of your sense of normality. It's normality is changing all the time because people are dying and people are like new faces are entering the same industries. I feel the simulations of nature is natural, as if like illusion is a part of truth. I feel that eventually we're going to recognize, just like how our planet is hovering in the middle of nowhere, so is our knowledge. What that means is we realize it has all been art. So I'm sorry to say there has been no such thing as knowledge in some sense, and academia is a very beautiful performance. In some sense, there has just been approaches, explorations. Yeah, I'll do it right here. I'll tell you guys. If I was to ask myself honestly right now, what is here in this present moment as I'm speaking? What is this intelligence? For me, it would just be presence, the presence of existence. And as there's movement in this still and silent of existence, there comes the endless animation of worlds and selves. For your mind, the self is the true world of the world. Trust me, the ego has to own something or it wouldn't be an ego. I feel human beings, you can kind of take what I'm saying in the playful context and metaphor of an eagle being able to come and sit on the branch and observe reality up close, but also fly in the sky and see the big picture. And I want the children of the future generations to open their wings, to be able to create such an efficient system. It's as if the kid who was disgraced by his parents, in some sense, did something that the parents recognized. Uh, until the true self directed things. It's very strange, but I've noticed that the moment I want something from the future, or the moment I'm thinking of my past, I am no longer me. I am like, my attention has dwelt too long on data that was now belongs, the breeze. We have to share something with this world. I feel human existence doesn't come empty handed because our hands have to build the future of the civilization. And it's a very unique point because this means, as knowledge, now I'm going to kind of bring this more down to earth. Imagine all the universities in the world suddenly began to realize that based on the name university, they have to teach the children everything about the universe that humanity knows so far. And the goal of the educational system would be to give access to the highest knowledge to everybody. Because the sooner you give people vision, the sooner they can do something about what they see. And I feel no longer the wars of the future generations are physical. You know, we will just make war something where if leaders in the UN decide to go to war, it'll be like they'd kind of take, like they'd make video game simulations of militaries of different companies, and the leaders would all play like a kind of LAN game. And so whichever kind of leaders military won, then that be it. They decide who was the winner, and they'd kind of play it along that way. Because the cost of war is the death of art, the death of creativity. Just like how parents protect their child's eyes from what they feel the child's eyes must not see yet, similarly, we have to protect the world from inefficient modes of its behavior. So think of it this way. Imagine there was this kind of like I got inspiration from Jordan Peterson because he's a psychologist, but also like uh, he's behind behind the mask of a psychologist is the wonders of a person who's trying to ask the biggest questions. So, anyways, what I'm trying to say is that the psychologist, after let's say this psychologist has helped the whole world, and the whole world is at their greatest, happiest kind of mindset, and most able, what is left? And that is to study the behavior of where meaning directs our attention. Eventually, it will come to studying your attention. And that's what meditation was. That's what synchronicity, intuition, everything wondrous about the world is leading to that. To where the wonder began. To where the eyes opened and the journey occurred. This world is a great happening. Once I found myself in a moment where I had to share my view on death. And it was a very unique moment because it was an idea which I could say I hadn't verbalized that way often. But in that moment, this is the view I shared. I said it's kind of like we're just the site, and this site is a great happening. Like something very unique is happening. We exist as a multidimensionally sophisticated creatures. It's as if the world is given to us, the playing field is given to us. Now we have to be players. And hence the world is a simulation of alertness and awareness. The more you see, the less you are limited, but the more complex the world can become. So you have to find your own style quickly before you truly go. What that means is the earlier you do this, the more you're realizing you're giving your mind freedom prior to defining it. This freedom is space. This freedom must be preserved with peace. That means the reason we need world peace is because world peace is going to become an atmosphere where the greatest innovation can efficiently perform. You see, it's like all of humanity's problems, issues will go away when they all recognize the value of an efficient involvement with their civilization. This means we have to rebuild or remember. Remember, I don't know why I said that way, but remember, we have to remember the pillars of civilization. We got to recognize the certain, you know, ambiguous kind of unknown context that the world was meant to be held in. We cannot let go of where we came from. So similarly, we cannot let go for how our ancestors' eyes were open and they're like, okay, I will continue. That's it. I'm telling you, we just have to honor our ancestors, by when being in life, regardless of how comfortable or uncomfortable, first realizing that this world is here to be experienced, and your intelligence is in a kind of is here with everything else. So the first thing that the wise man in some sense finds himself is that he acknowledges a sort of silence. For me, whenever I don't know what to do, I stop trying to know things and I just watch. And as I watch my life, sensory data transforms into a sort of subjective navigation of this attention. This subjective navigation, when it speaks, it's manifest. As I'm speaking right now, suddenly you're seeing a personality to me. You're seeing a person in a sort of world of conceptual value. But I'm telling you, there's ways, like when I was younger, my mind would move through words more. I would see more, my imagination would be in language more rather than images. So I would try to. So there's a way your mind can be where behind your eyes a movie is happening, and because this movie is happening, this is a metaphor. Okay, this is not what's happening exactly, but I'm telling you, like, this is the closest metaphor I can give. Imagine there's this movie happening, and then you give words as if you see an artwork, you see something, then you explain it. Okay, so you access the data, and then processing program comes in, whatever it is, your culture, race, or whatever you were, wherever you were born, or however way you have chosen to kind of play this costume game. In a world of lies, it is always Halloween, but people are dressing themselves with the wrong ideas. Back in the day, societies, um, especially European societies, they were designed for glory. You see, it's as if the most efficient state of mind for the human being was given to it. Instead of, imagine, like, suddenly, how some people have this mentality that there's just like an elite individual controlling the whole world. Let me tell you, imagine suddenly this elite individual. Ooh, what I'm trying to explain is that your mind can move faster than your body. Your mind doesn't have to just abide by a linear notion of reality, space, and time, or the clay that your hand sculpts. So you got to understand that how you value your intelligence, it's your own vision. So you got to learn to take your eyes seriously, but also not to take them seriously, because what the eye sees, it evolves the whole intelligence towards. Right now, you see that human beings, a lot of their world is being experienced only through their sight. But I consider that that is just the sensory data is there. This sensory data is incredible. Okay, it is what is it is the world. Our eyes are the world. You see, and so because our eyes are the world, it's a sort of, it's as if we are a design of nature, designed so uniquely that we were able to take this light and imagine a free will's kind of future. I am kind of shocked to the precision of the nature's craftsmanship in the human design. It is too fascinating how the eye of the creature was even a potential. You see, every stage of evolution was unknown before it occurred, before it could be considered. So that's what I'm telling you. The world is constantly being reanimated. In some sense, what we are saying is the movement of our body is also the constant reanimation of a subjective relationship. As if matter is not just matter. This cup, this object, okay, this cup in front of me, I'm calling this object a cup. But before people even knew what the word cup was, even that word was even used, it's as if this was not a cup, this was something. It was just maybe glass shape. But what I'm trying to tell you is that we put the world, we put language on the world and then forgot that the real world was there. So suddenly we became characters in a story, and in some sense, an endless mechanistic approach of the ego was born. It's like, it's very interesting. Some people could argue that de-evolution is also evolution, if there's the opposite just occurring after. So what I'm trying to tell you is like, for me, life is a sort of stage where in the waking state the intelligence functions. And you can live in various ways, and the moment you recognize you're not a thought, you come to the present moment and you just realize this neutral ability of, like, as if you remember a moment before you learned language and life was just fully here. And then it was kind of put into a process of endless, infinite segmentation and classification. The world was made into a story. So that means every sense of depression and stress the person has, that is a generation of the moment. All these words that I'm saying right now, we can say if there was a neurological way we could scope my brain, it would be certain parts of the brain lighting up, mainly probably the frontal lobe. So what I'm trying to tell you is that as I'm speaking right now, there is an objective kind of abidance, as if it's like there's the neurological component, which is a sort of intelligent activity, and then there is this whole subjective kind of world of the mind that exists to even be a soul. So it's like this kind of thing that pretty much life is being seen in two dimensions of value and shape, and these dimensions of no shape. And eventually one will recognize. That's why they said, you don't have to, after this is the next greatest teaching, go dance in the world. But this dance is not a dance. Like, it doesn't have to be just physical dance. It's like, what I mean is, go roar as a free being in a world that you're being. Discover your true nature, learn from it. And then it's like, first, the student wants the teacher to teach the world. But then the teacher is telling the student that the world is the ultimate teacher. What that means is, like, you don't understand the value of your eyes until your intelligence opens its wings. Pretty much you transcend a chaotic and dualistic limitation of a sort of dualistic frame of your subconscious. I think if Carl Jung was alive and he could hear me, he'd be like, whoa. Ooh. So guys, my computer has 10%, so I gotta cut this short. Thanks for tuning in. These notions that I'm sharing, they must be approached playfully. Philosophy is the domain of the unknown and must not be entered with a sort of kind of thirst for expectation. reality is too unknown for knowledge to be the God. So we can say the God of the known being entity is an unknown. That's it. You know. So the unknown is the most awe-inspiring thing. The vastness of the cosmos brings us into tears, because like how big and small we are. As we embrace the external simulation, we will discover the internal simulation. As we discover the internal simulation, suddenly the external internal dynamic stops. As the external internal dynamic stops, then comes like this kind of state of how can I say it? You get updated by how the whole world is in alignment in your vision. I don't know how to tell you. It's natural. It's like the next part of the evolutionary process, that it's not just in language. I can't explain it, because it's like an integrative dynamism of the collective attention, like where all the attention of the beings are going. So, anyways, thanks for tuning in. If the reality is a changing world, or dreams, all beliefs are dreams in a changing world. Much blessings and all.